For 2,000 years, one name has been synonymous with pure evil: Judas Iscariot. Dante placed him in the lowest circle of hell, being chewed on eternally by Satan himself. In art, he is painted with dark features, clutching a bag of coins, lurking in the shadows. He is the man who sold the Son of God for 30 pieces of silver. He is the traitor who betrayed his master with a kiss. The four canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all agree on the narrative. Judas was a thief. Satan entered him. He led the Roman soldiers to the Garden of Gethsemane, and after the deed was done, consumed by guilt, he went out and hanged himself, his body bursting open in a field of blood. The Church has used him as the ultimate cautionary tale. You can be close to Jesus and still be a son of perdition. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the four Gospels were written by men who didn't know the secret? What if Judas wasn't a traitor, but the only disciple who actually passed the test? In 180 AD, a church father named Irenaeus wrote a furious letter attacking a group of Christians who possessed a secret history. He claimed they read a book called the Gospel of Judas, which turned the villain into the hero. For centuries, scholars thought Irenaeus was making it up. They thought this book was a myth. They were wrong. The story of how this book resurfaced is a thriller in itself. It doesn't begin in a library, it begins in a grave. In 1978, in the desert cliffs of Minya, Egypt, a peasant was digging for treasure in ancient burial caves. He wasn't an archaeologist, he was a grave robber. He stumbled upon a limestone box. Inside, he found a leather-bound codex, an ancient book wrapped in papyrus. It was written in Coptic, the ancient Egyptian language using Greek letters. The peasant didn't know what he had found. He didn't know he was holding a document that would shake the foundations of Christianity. He just saw old paper. He sold it to a jewelry dealer in Cairo for a small sum. The dealer didn't know its value either, but he knew it was old. This manuscript, now known as the Codex Chakos, contained 4 texts. One was a letter to Peter. One was a revelation of James. But the 4th text was the dynamite. The title at the end of the papyrus read, "The Gospel of Judas." But before the world could read it, the book had to survive a journey through hell. The manuscript was smuggled out of Egypt. It entered the dark, unregulated world of the antiquities black market. It traveled to Europe and then to the United States. In 1983, a potential buyer met the dealer in a hotel room in Geneva, Switzerland. The dealer asked for $3 million. The buyer, a scholar named Stephen Emmel, was allowed to look at the text for a few minutes. He saw the Coptic script. He knew it was genuine ancient papyrus, but the price was too high. The deal collapsed. For the next 16 years, the manuscript vanished. It sat in a bank vault in Hicksville, New York. And then, tragically, it sat in a freezer. The dealer, thinking the cold would preserve the papyrus, actually destroyed it. The moisture in the freezer caused the ink to darken and the fibers to become brittle. The book began to rot. It was literally turning into dust. In 2000, a Swiss antiques dealer named Frieda Nussberger Chakos bought it. She realized the manuscript was dying. She frantically called in experts to save it. When the restoration team finally opened the crumbling pages, they found a jigsaw puzzle. Thousands of tiny fragments of papyrus had broken off. It took 5 years to piece them back together. But when they translated the first line, they froze. The text begins with a sentence that sets it apart from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It does not start with a genealogy. It does not start with a birth. It opens with the secret account of the revelation that Jesus spoke in conversation with Judas Iscariot during a week 3 days before he celebrated Passover. This is not a public biography. This is a secret conversation. The setting is intimate. The gospel portrays Jesus differently immediately. In this text, Jesus is often laughing. But he isn't laughing with joy. He is laughing at the ignorance of the other disciples. In one scene, the disciples are praying over the Eucharist, the bread. Jesus approaches them and laughs. The disciples get angry and ask, "Teacher, why are you laughing at our prayer of thanksgiving? We have done what is right." Jesus answers them, "I'm not laughing at you. You are not doing this because of your own will, but because it is through this that your God will be praised. Notice the lowercase God. Jesus tells the disciples, Peter, James, John, that they are praying to a different God than he is. The disciples are furious. They become angry in their hearts. But one man stands up, one man understands. Judas Iscariot stands before him and says, I know who you are and where you have come from. You are from the immortal realm of Barbelo. This was the key. Judas knew the secret origin of Jesus. And because of that, Jesus separates Judas from the 12 and says, step away from the others, and I shall tell you the mysteries of the kingdom. To understand why this book was dangerous, you have to understand the philosophy behind it, Gnosticism. The Gnostics believed that the physical world was a prison, created not by the true God, but by a lesser, chaotic deity, often called Yaldabaoth. They believed our spirits are trapped in these flesh bodies, and salvation is not about forgiveness of sin. It is about waking up and escaping the physical realm. In the Gospel of Judas, Jesus tells Judas the truth about the cosmos. He explains that the 12 disciples are worshipping the God of this world, the creator of the physical trap. They are obsessed with rituals, animal sacrifices, and the temple. Jesus says to Judas, come, that I may teach you about secrets no person has ever seen. He describes a higher realm, an immortal realm of Barbelo, that no eye of an angel has ever seen, no thought of the heart has ever comprehended, and never was it called by any name. Jesus is saying, I am not from here, I'm not from this universe, and the God you people worship is not my Father. This was heresy to the early church. It separated the God of Genesis from the God of Jesus. It turned the Creator into the jailer, and Judas was the only one smart enough to see the difference. The next morning, the disciples come to Jesus. They are disturbed. They had a nightmare. They say, Master, we saw a great house with a large altar in it, and 12 priests, we would say they were us, and a crowd waiting at that altar. Jesus asks, what were the priests doing? The disciples reply, some sacrifice their own children, others their wives, in praise and humility with each other. Some sleep with men, some are involved in slaughter, some commit a multitude of sins and deeds of lawlessness. And the men standing before the altar invoke your name. This is a terrifying vision. The disciples see themselves as priests committing horrific acts in Jesus' name. They expect Jesus to comfort them and say, don't worry, that wasn't you. Instead, Jesus confirms the horror. He says, those you have seen receiving the offerings at the altar, that is who you are. That is the God you serve. Jesus condemns the future church. He predicts that the apostles will build a religion based on animal sacrifice and control, planting trees without fruit in his name. He tells them they are leading people astray. This is why the church fathers hated this book. It puts the corruption of the church directly into the mouth of Jesus. After this confrontation, Jesus pulls Judas away again. Judas asks the question that haunts every human. What is the advantage that I have received? For you have set me apart for that generation. Jesus tells him the cost of the mission. He says, you will become the 13th, and you will be cursed by the other generations, and you will come to rule over them. The 13th. In Gnostic numerology, the number 12 represents the physical order, 12 months, 12 zodiac signs, 12 tribes. To be the 13th means to be outside the system, to be the outlier. Jesus tells Judas that his star is ascending. He shows him a vision of a luminous cloud. Lift up your eyes and look at the cloud and the light within it and the stars surrounding it. The star that leads the way is your star. Judas is destined to be hated by history. He is destined to be spat upon by the other disciples. But in the spiritual realm, Jesus promises him a higher rank than Peter, James, or John. He tells him, you will be exceeding all of them. Why? Because Judas has the hardest job. Here we arrive at the climax of the text, the moment that changes everything we know about the crucifixion. In the Standard Bible, Judas betrays Jesus for money, greed, or because Satan entered him. But in the Gospel of Judas, Jesus gives him a direct order. Jesus looks at Judas and says, "But you will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." Read that again. Sacrifice the man that clothes me. Jesus is teaching that his physical body is not him. It is just a suit, a trap, a garment. As long as he is in the body, he is stuck in the lower world. To return to the divine realm, the body must be destroyed. The man must die so that God can be free. He is asking Judas to help him escape. He is effectively saying, "Judas, I need you to kill me." The others don't understand. They think death is bad. You understand that death is the exit. Do this for me. You will bear the curse of history, but you will free my spirit. Judas accepts the mission. He isn't a traitor. He is the most loyal soldier. He takes the burden of eternal shame to obey his master. This transforms the kiss in the Garden of Gethsemane from an act of hatred into an act of tragic love. The text of the Gospel of Judas moves rapidly to its conclusion. It does not linger on the Last Supper or the washing of feet. It moves directly to the deed. Judas leaves Jesus. He goes to the high priests and scribes. The text says, "Their high priests murmured because he had gone into the guest room for his prayer. But some scribes were there watching carefully in order to arrest him during the prayer, for they were afraid of the people, since he was regarded by all as a prophet." They approach Judas. They ask him, "What are you doing here? You are Jesus' disciple." Judas answers them exactly as they wished. He takes the money, and then the manuscript delivers its final chilling line, "And he handed him over to them." That is it. The book ends. There is no trial. There is no crucifixion. There is no resurrection. Why? Because to the Gnostics who wrote this, the physical death didn't matter. The victory was already won the moment Judas handed him over. By triggering the arrest, Judas unlocked the cage. He set the sequence in motion that would destroy the man that clothed the divine spirit. The story stops because the mission was accomplished. Judas had successfully liberated God from the prison of the flesh. This text didn't just offer a different story, it offered a different Jesus. And this terrified the early church. In the Orthodox view, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the body of Jesus is sacred. The resurrection of the body is the hope of all Christians. If Jesus didn't physically rise, the faith is in vain. God became flesh to redeem the flesh. But the Gospel of Judas preaches the opposite. It says the flesh is trash. It says the body is a trap. It presents a Jesus who wants to die, not to save humanity from sin, but to save himself from humanity. If this book had been accepted into the Bible, Christianity would look completely different today. We wouldn't wear crosses, symbols of suffering. We wouldn't take communion, eating the body. We would view the physical world as a mistake to be escaped, not a creation to be stewarded. The Church Fathers realized that these two versions of Jesus could not coexist. One of them had to be erased. Enter the antagonist of our story, Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyon. Writing around 180 AD, he was the watchdog of orthodoxy. He saw these secret books circulating, books that claimed Judas was a hero, or that Eve liberated Adam, or that the serpent was the good guy. He declared war. In his massive work against heresies, he specifically attacks the Gospel of Judas. He wrote, "They declare that Judas the traitor was thoroughly acquainted with these things, and that he alone, knowing the truth as no others did, accomplished the mystery of the betrayal." They produce a fictitious history of this kind, which they style the Gospel of Judas. Irenaeus argued that if Judas is a hero, then the martyrs who died refusing to deny the physical resurrection died for nothing. He argued that this secret knowledge was elitist poison. He established a simple rule. There are 4 winds and 4 corners of the earth, so there should only be 4 gospels. Anything else was heresy. Anything else was dangerous. Once a book was labeled heresy, it didn't just get a bad review. It got a death sentence. In the 4th century, after Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, the church moved from being persecuted to being the persecutor. Bishops like Athanasius sent out festal letters listing the accepted books of the Bible, the 27 books we have today. He gave a strict command regarding the others. Let no one add to these. Let nothing be taken away. This triggered a purge. Monks who were hiding these secret Gnostic texts in their libraries were terrified. They couldn't keep them on the shelves, but they couldn't bear to burn the words of Jesus, even the forbidden ones. So they did the only thing they could do. They took the books, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas, and they buried them in earthen jars in the Egyptian desert. They hid them in caves, hoping that a future generation would find them. Then the silence fell. For 1,600 years, the Gospel of Judas ceased to exist. History was written by the winners. Judas became the villain. The secret mission was forgotten, until a grave robber in 1978 swung his pickaxe and hit something hard in the darkness. When the rotting fragments of the Gospel of Judas finally reached the laboratory in the early 2000s, skepticism was high. It sounded too perfect, a lost book that completely rewrites the villain of the Bible. Many scholars suspected a forgery, so they subjected the papyrus to the most rigorous forensic testing available. They used radiocarbon dating on the leather binding and the papyrus itself. They analyzed the ink composition using spectral imaging. They examined the handwriting style, paleography, to see if it matched ancient Coptic scribes. The results were undeniable. The carbon dating placed the document between 220 and 340 AD. The ink was an ancient recipe of iron gall and soot, consistent with the 3rd century. The dialect was a rare form of Sahidic Coptic, used only in that specific era. This meant the manuscript was authentic. It was not a modern fake. It was a genuine ancient document, copied by a scribe in Egypt roughly 1700 years ago. While it wasn't the original text written by Judas himself, which would have been in Aramaic or Greek around 30 AD, it was a verified copy of the text Irenaeus had complained about in 180 AD. The ghost had returned. On April 6, 2006, the National Geographic Society held a press conference in Washington, D.C. that was broadcast around the world. They unveiled the Gospel of Judas. The headlines were explosive. Judas betrayed Jesus at his own request. The traitor was the best disciple. It became a cultural phenomenon, but the backlash was instant. The Vatican did not issue an official statement on the specific day, but top theologians slammed it. They argued that this was not history, but fan fiction from a confused Gnostic sect. They pointed out that just because a book is old doesn't mean it's true. Scholars began to fight over the translation. One crucial word became the center of the war: the word daimon. In the text, Jesus calls Judas a daimon. The National Geographic team translated this as spirit, a positive term. But other scholars argued it meant demon, a negative term. Was Jesus calling Judas a noble spirit or a demon? The debate raged. Was the book pro-Judas, or was it actually mocking him as a fool who thought he was helping but was actually being used? The hero theory began to crack, but the mystery only deepened. So what do we do with the Gospel of Judas? Do we tear the pages out of our Bibles and replace them? No. But this book proves something vital. It proves that early Christianity was not a monolith. It was a battlefield of ideas. In the first few centuries, there were fierce debates about who Jesus was. Was he a man? Was he a spirit? Was the God of the Old Testament the Father or a monster? The Gospel of Judas represents the road not taken. It represents the Gnostic desire to escape the world rather than redeem it. If we accept the story in this book, Judas becomes the ultimate tragic figure. He is the man who does the dirty work so the light can shine. He is the Batman of the Bible, the Dark Knight who accepts the hatred of the world to save the city. But if we stick to the canonical Gospels, Judas remains a warning that you can be in the presence of the light and still choose the darkness. The Gospel of Judas is just one volume in the library of the lost. There are others, books that describe the childhood of Jesus, books that describe the tours of hell, books that claim to be written by Eve herself. We have explored the traitor, but what about the child? There is a banned book that claims to tell the missing story of Jesus between the ages of 5 and 12. But in this book, the boy Jesus isn't just a carpenter's son. He strikes teachers blind, he withers trees with a word. He kills those who bump into him. Is this a record of a dangerous divine power learning to control itself, or is it blasphemy? Next time on the 67th book, we open the infancy gospel of Thomas, the story of the dangerous child. Subscribe now. The archives are open, and we are just getting started.